Welcome, listeners, to another episode of our scary stories. I'm your host, ready to guide you once more into the darkness that lies just beyond the veil of reality. Tonight, we delve into a world where the line between life and death blurs, where echoes of the past stir in the shadows. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, or uncomfortable as the case may be, and prepare to walk the corridors of the afterlife with a night security guard at a morgue who is about to embark on a chilling journey. Be warned, dear listeners, once you start down this path, there's no turning back. Welcome to the graveyard shift. A moon's pale glow spilled across the quiet cityscape, casting long shadows on the old municipal building that housed the city morgue. Jake Mallory, a hardened middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard, ran a hand over his weary face. His shift had just begun, and already the oppressive silence of the morgue was making his skin crawl. The cold, clinical sterility of the morgue was an ever-present reminder of the life Jake had left behind, the relentless pursuit of justice, the adrenaline of a mystery unraveled. Now, only the drone of the air conditioning and the ticking clock were his companions. A soft sigh escaped him as he began his rounds, flashlight in hand, casting a stark halo of light across the rows of refrigerated chambers. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. His breath fogged the air as an icy chill crept along his spine. It was an unnatural cold, the kind that seeped into your bones and whispered of forgotten secrets. The sterile smell of disinfectant was replaced by the faint scent of lavender, and something metallic, something unsettling, like the aroma of old blood. Jake felt his heart pounding, a drumbeat against the stifling silence. The beam of his flashlight landed on an open locker at the far end. Except, Jake knew he'd checked, double-checked even, every door before his break. A figure lay within, a young woman, too young to be lying there, untouched by time or decay. Her hair was a shock of red, vibrant against the cold steel table she was laid upon. Her eyes, a piercing green, stared blankly at the ceiling. Her name, he knew, was Marion. "Evening, Marion," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Silence was his reply, and for a moment, Jake felt a pang of regret for the life cut so short. As he turned to leave, a cold whisper brushed against his ear. "Who will remember me, Jake?" The voice was soft, filled with an eerie longing. Jake spun around, flashlight trembling in his hand. The locker was empty. The echo of his name hung in the freezing air, a chilling confirmation of the unbelievable. The apparition of Marion stood before him, an ethereal glow in the darkness. This was impossible, he thought, his heart hammering against his chest. His logical mind grappled with the reality before him. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but she didn't disappear. In fact, she seemed more solid, her spectral form flickering with an otherworldly light. The sound of a soft, melancholic humming filled the room, a tune from a forgotten lullaby. Fear gripped him, yet curiosity held him rooted to the spot. He watched, awestruck and horrified, as the ghost of Marion began to share her tale, her spectral voice weaving a haunting tale of love, betrayal, and a life abruptly stolen. The scent of lavender grew stronger, the soft notes of her song a stark contrast to the pounding of his heart. Jake Mallory, the man who had thought he'd seen it all, could only stand and watch as the ghost of Marion pulled back the veil between life and death, irrevocably changing the course of his night shift. In the bleak sterility of the morgue, under the cold scrutiny of the moon, the first whispers of the dead began their eerie symphony, marking the start of the graveyard shift like never before. And Jake, the unwilling audience, could do nothing but listen. As dawn's early light filtered through the grimy windows of the morgue, the specter of Marion seemed to wane, like fog dissolving under the harsh scrutiny of the sun. Jake found himself alone in the eerily quiet room, the tale of Marion's life and death reverberating in his head. His shift ended with the rising sun, and he left the chilling emptiness of the morgue, stepping out into the bustling city, its lively rhythms a stark contrast to the world he had just left behind. His mind was a whirl of questions, all circling around one incontrovertible fact. He had just conversed with a ghost. Jake decided to brush it off as a hallucination, a result of fatigue, or perhaps the silence of the morgue playing tricks on his mind. He was, after all, a man of reason, a former detective who relied on facts, not fables. Ghosts didn't exist, and surely his mind was merely fabricating these apparitions out of loneliness and the unnerving silence of the graveyard shift. Yet, despite his logical reasoning, the scent of lavender clung to him, a ghostly reminder of Marion's presence. His sleep was filled with fragmented images of her ethereal figure, the sadness in her bright green eyes, and her voice, soft yet insistent, whispering her tale. He awoke in the late afternoon, his sleep neither restful nor sufficient. With a sense of trepidation, he prepared for his shift. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with hues of red and gold, Jake found himself once again at the entrance of the morgue, its gray, foreboding structure casting a long shadow on the dimly lit street. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped inside, half expecting Marion to be there, waiting for him. However, the room was just as he had left it, cold, clean, and devoid of any spectral figures. Jake let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps it had been a dream, after all. His relief, however, was short-lived. As he began his usual routine, the temperature dropped sharply. A familiar icy chill snaked down his spine, and the scent of lavender, faint but undeniable, wafted in the air. Before he could even turn around, he heard her voice, clearer now, resonating through the vast, empty room. "Who will remember me, Jake?" The voice hung in the frosty air, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. The apparition of Marion stood before him, her eyes pleading, her voice echoing her untold story. She had returned, and it was clear she wouldn't leave until her tale was known. Jake's logical deductions were tossed aside, and he was left grappling with a reality far beyond his comprehension. But Jake was a seeker of truth, a resolver of mysteries. And perhaps, in the eerily cold morgue with the scent of lavender hanging in the air, he had found his most challenging case yet. A case that spanned the realms of life and death, beckoning him into the world of the unexplained, the supernatural. In the depths of his fear and disbelief, a spark of determination was kindled. If Marion's tale had to be told, he would be the one to tell it. It was time to listen, to delve into the realm of apparitions and unresolved mysteries. In the silence of the night, under the watchful gaze of 1,000 dead, Jake prepared himself to listen to the first whisper of the forgotten dead. It was clear his graveyard shift was going to be anything but ordinary. As the days morphed into weeks, Jake found himself immersed in a reality he had never envisioned. Each night, Marion would appear, her ghostly form seemingly more tangible, her story more heart-wrenching. Her whispers echoed around the icy walls of the morgue, each word a puzzle piece in her unsolved murder. His days, once filled with aimless wandering and brooding silence, were now dedicated to understanding the mystery of Marion's death. Armed with a notepad filled with disjointed facts and half-formed theories, Jake ventured into the city, his former detective instincts reawakening. He visited the places Marion spoke of in her nocturnal revelations. A decaying Victorian house at the end of a cobblestone path. Once Marion's home, now sat vacant, its empty windows like hollow eyes staring back at him. The scent of lavender was here too, faint but distinct, a haunting signature of Marion's lingering presence. His next stop was the Willow Cafe, where Marion once worked part-time, its rustic charm undiminished by the passage of time. Conversations with the elderly owner revealed fragments of Marion's life, a vivacious woman much loved, her death an unexpected blow to the close-knit community. Jake's quest took him deeper into the underbelly of the city, chasing shadows of a past hidden beneath layers of secrets and lies. He questioned Marion's friends, discreetly, spinning a tale of an unsolved case revisited. The pieces of Marion's puzzle were falling into place, and a picture began to emerge, one of a woman in the prime of her life, cruelly snatched away by the jaws of death. As he delved deeper into the mystery, his encounters with Marion became more intense. The chill in the morgue deepened, the scent of lavender became a constant presence, and her whispers turned into desperate pleas. Marion's spirit was growing restless, her desire for justice, and peace evident in her ethereal visage. One night, under the harsh glow of the morgue's clinical lights, a startling revelation sent chills down Jake's spine. Marion's words painted a gruesome scene, a shadowy figure, a scuffle, and then nothing but darkness. Jake knew then, with a chilling certainty, that Marion hadn't merely passed away, she had been murdered. His blood turned to ice in his veins as he realized the magnitude of the situation. Marion's unsolved murder wasn't just a ghostly tale whispered in the dead of the night. It was a real, cold-blooded crime that had gone unpunished. And now, the weight of resolving it rested on his weary shoulders. Jake, the night security guard, found himself thrust back into his past life, his instincts as a detective ignited by the whispers of the dead. As the reality of Marion's fate became clearer, his resolve hardened. Justice would be served. Marion's spirit would find peace, and the graveyard shift would become a silent vigil once again. His pursuit of the truth, previously a reluctant acceptance of his ghostly encounters, was now a mission. As the sun rose each morning, Jake's determination intensified. Each whisper, each apparition was a call to action, a plea from beyond the grave. And Jake would stop at nothing to answer that call. Jake was now a man possessed, his every waking hour dedicated to solving the mystery of Marion's death. He had abandoned his initial fear and disbelief, replacing them with a relentless pursuit of the truth. His quiet, withdrawn demeanor had been swapped for the dogged determination that once marked him as a top detective on the force. The city records department was his first stop, a dusty, paper-stacked testament to the city's past. The sight of manila folders and overflowing filing cabinets was a familiar one, the musky scent of old paper reminiscent of his years spent unraveling the city's secrets. Here he sought the official account of Marion's demise, hidden in the archives of unsolved cases. He pored over the scant details, found dead in her home, no signs of forced entry. The cause of death ruled as an unfortunate accident. But Jake knew better now. Marion's whispers from beyond had revealed a different tale, one filled with sinister shadows and a sudden, abrupt end. His next destination was Marion's old neighborhood, a quaint part of the city untouched by time. The cobblestone streets echoed with laughter and whispers of a simpler time. But beneath its charming exterior, secrets were buried, waiting to be unearthed. Jake was a familiar sight, his frequent visits piquing the curiosity of the locals. He wore his old detective badge like a shield, deflecting the suspicion his presence inevitably aroused. The old townsfolk, initially hesitant, slowly opened up, revealing bits and pieces of Marion's life. They spoke of her infectious laughter, her vibrant personality, and her sudden, tragic demise. Among hushed whispers and knowing glances, a name often surfaced: Thomas, Marion's former flame. He was a charming figure, his mysterious departure shortly after Marion's death a puzzle that needed solving. Jake's mind whirred with this new piece of information, his detective instincts sensing a possible lead. His curiosity piqued, he decided to delve deeper. Marion's whispers had never mentioned Thomas, an omission that seemed strange. Armed with this new lead, Jake found renewed vigor. His night shifts at the morgue were no longer chilling vigils. They were sessions with Marion, her ghostly form a source of solace rather than fear. Her longing for justice mirrored his determination, their nightly encounters becoming a beacon of hope in the endless abyss of the unresolved mystery. His days were filled with tireless investigations, interviews with Marion's acquaintances, visits to the places she frequented. The nights were a soothing balm, the scent of lavender a comforting presence. Despite the grim circumstances, Jake found an uncanny peace in his purpose. As days turned into weeks, Jake found himself drawn further into the enigma of Marion's death. The pieces were slowly coming together, forming a mosaic of deception and tragedy. The echoes of Marion's past were leading him on a twisted journey, the resolution of which remained shrouded in uncertainty. But Jake was undeterred. He was no longer a mere security guard at a morgue. He was a beacon for the lost souls, a voice for their unheard stories. His graveyard shift was no longer a monotonous vigil. It was a quest for truth. As the whispers of the dead grew louder, Jake delved deeper into the labyrinth of Marion's untold tale, his resolve unwavering. Despite the unnerving aura of his task, Jake began to find a rhythm in his days. The hustle of the city was his constant daytime companion, its energy fueling his relentless pursuit of the truth. Nights were a study in contrast, the icy silence of the morgue punctuated by Marion's ethereal whispers, a haunting melody in the dance of the dead. Thomas, Marion's former flame, was the missing link in the puzzle. Jake traced his steps, delving into the past of this enigmatic character. His inquiries led him to a rundown bar at the edge of the city. The bar held a weathered charm, its battered sign swinging in the wind, creaking under the weight of countless stories. The barkeep, a grizzled man with hard lines etched into his face, recognized the name. Thomas, he revealed, was a regular, often seen with Marion, their chemistry undeniable. But there was something else, a shadow that flitted across the barkeep's eyes as he mentioned Thomas's abrupt disappearance. Unsettled yet intrigued, Jake dug deeper, his trail leading him through dark alleyways and forgotten parts of the city. He followed whispers of underground dealings, illegal bets, and sudden fortunes lost. Thomas, it seemed, was entangled in a dangerous web, its threads casting long. ominous shadows on his relationship with Marion. Each revelation, each hushed confession painted a more sinister picture. Thomas, far from the charming man Marion knew, was a man of secrets, a silent player in the city's underworld. Yet Marion's ghostly narrative painted a different picture, one of a loving and affectionate man. Could these two starkly different personas belong to the same man? Jake's nightly encounters with Marion were changing too. Her once gentle demeanor was increasingly tinged with a sense of urgency, her spectral whispers filled with a desperation that echoed in the empty morgue. Her story, her need for justice, was pushing Jake to the edge, blurring the lines between his role as a security guard and his past life as a detective. One night, as the moon bathed the morgue in a silvery glow, Marion revealed a secret, her voice barely a whisper. She spoke of a mysterious package Thomas had given her, its contents unknown, hidden within the loose floorboard of her room. Jake's heart pounded in his chest at this revelation. Could this be the key to unraveling the mystery? As the first light of dawn filtered through the grimy windows of the morgue, Jake made a promise to the fading form of Marion. He would find this package. He would unearth the secrets Thomas held. His quest for justice was no longer just a promise to a departed soul. It had become his mission. As Marion's whispers faded into the growing dawn, Jake readied himself to delve deeper into the web of shadows. The truth was within his grasp, and he was one step closer to bringing peace to Marion's restless spirit. With the promise of uncovering Marion's hidden package, a fresh wave of determination washed over Jake. This was the lead he'd been waiting for, the missing piece that could finally piece together the shattered puzzle of Marion's untimely death. As the city awakened, Jake set off towards Marion's old home, the Victorian house at the end of the cobblestone street, now standing empty and forlorn. The house was a sepia-toned photograph come to life. Its once vibrant colors had faded with time, and the peeling paint on the walls told tales of happier times. Walking into the house felt like crossing the threshold into a different era, the air heavy with the scent of memories and lavender. It was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the creaking of the old wooden floorboards under Jake's weight. In Marion's room, Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. This was where Marion had lived, loved, and ultimately breathed her last. The room held a ghostly charm, a sense of suspended time. It was easy to imagine Marion here, her laughter ringing through the house, her presence breathing life into the now lifeless space. Moving carefully, Jake began his search. He ran his hands over the worn wooden floorboards, feeling for any sign of a hidden cavity. His fingers traced over the smooth grain, the wood cold and silent beneath his touch. It wasn't until he reached the corner of the room that he found it, a floorboard that moved slightly under his weight. Heart pounding in his chest, he carefully pried the loose floorboard open, revealing a hidden nook. Inside, dust-covered and forgotten, was a small, neatly wrapped package. Its plain exterior gave no hint of its contents or their significance. With a sense of anticipation heavy in the air, Jake unwrapped the package. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. A quick flip through the pages revealed it was a diary, filled with Marion's elegant handwriting. The entries were personal, recounting her everyday life, her dreams and fears. And interspersed through these were mentions of Thomas, their shared moments, their budding romance, and, hauntingly, her growing suspicion of his secretive behavior. As Jake delved deeper into the diary, he realized this wasn't just a diary. It was a tangible piece of Marion's life and her connection with Thomas. This diary could be the key to unearthing the truth, to connecting Thomas's hidden life to Marion's death. Carrying the diary like a precious artifact, Jake left the Victorian house, its walls echoing with silent stories and hidden truths. As he stepped out onto the cobblestone street, the setting sun cast long shadows over the city. His quest had taken a promising turn, and the whispered secrets in Marion's diary promised to lead him closer to the truth. The morgue awaited him, silent and austere, its cold halls preparing to echo with Marion's spectral voice once again. With each passing day, the line between his duty as a security guard and his mission as a detective blurred. But Jake knew he wouldn't rest until Marion's story was fully told, and her soul finally found the peace it longed for. With Marion's diary in his possession, Jake felt a surge of progress. Each written page, each recounted memory was a gateway into Marion's heart and mind. As he sat in the silence of his small apartment, the buzz of the city below providing a steady hum, he began to delve into the entries. Marion's words painted a vivid picture of her life, her dreams of seeing the world, her love for the arts, and her growing affection for Thomas. Amid the everyday musings, Jake discovered mentions of Thomas's unpredictable behavior, his mysterious absences, and his evasive answers. The further Jake read, the clearer the picture became. Marion had fallen in love with a man who was hiding dangerous secrets. Her innocent affection had drawn her into a perilous web she did not understand. Yet her words bore no trace of fear, only a deep sense of concern for the man she loved. The entries took a darker turn as Jake reached the pages documenting the days leading to Marion's death. She had written about a heated argument with Thomas, his confession about some ominous debt, and a promise that he would set things right. The diary ended abruptly after this entry, a chilling reminder of Marion's untimely death. Haunted by Marion's words, Jake felt the burden of responsibility. The diary was not just a window into Marion's life. It was a guide, a map to the truth. It was now clear to him that Thomas's underworld entanglements were somehow linked to Marion's death. The morgue felt even more isolating that night. The echo of his footsteps on the cold tile floors was a grim reminder of his solitary mission. He knew that his encounters with Marion would soon come to an end. He was close to solving her case, to granting her the peace she yearned for. As the night deepened, he waited for Marion. Her ghostly presence arrived as always, her ethereal voice filling the silence. He relayed his discoveries, narrating each revelation from the diary, his voice punctuating the stillness of the morgue. Marion's response was filled with sadness and relief, her spectral form flickering like a candle against the wind. She thanked Jake for his perseverance, her words trailing off into the silence of the night. As the early rays of dawn crept into the morgue, Jake was left with a sense of purpose stronger than ever. Days melded into nights as Jake painstakingly connected the dots. Every whispered confession, every hidden fact brought him closer to the truth. His journey was far from over, the path twisted and dangerous, but he was resolute. The mystery of Marion's untimely demise was slowly unraveling, and with it, the hope of setting her spirit free was growing stronger. Armed with the revelations from Marion's diary, Jake's mission took on a sharper focus. He found himself drawn back to Thomas's haunts, the dimly lit bar, the backstreet gambling dens, each visit unearthing a new fragment of the puzzle. His search led him to a disused warehouse at the city's fringes. Graffiti marked the aging exterior, its faded hues reflecting the grit and grime of the city's underbelly. Jake knew that Thomas had frequent dealings here, a den for the city's shady transactions. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of dusty crates and long-abandoned equipment. The air held the faint smell of rust and stale air, the echoes of Thomas's past activities lingering. Shadows loomed ominously as Jake navigated his way deeper into the warehouse. Every creak, every distant echo sent a shiver down his spine, adding to the unnerving suspense of his search. Jake's persistence was rewarded when he stumbled upon an old safe hidden behind a pile of crates. It was locked, but years of decay had worn down the mechanism, and Jake was able to pry it open. The contents of the safe were as cryptic as Thomas's life. Among the assorted items was an envelope filled with old IOU notes and a photograph. The photograph sent a chill down Jake's spine. It was a snapshot of Thomas and Marion, their smiles bright and hopeful. On the back, in Marion's elegant handwriting, were the words, "To brighter days." A painful irony, given the shadowy turn their lives had taken. The IU notes bore the names of known crime bosses, their hefty amounts a stark indicator of the depth of Thomas's troubles. The trail of Thomas's life was becoming clearer, his involvement in the underworld, his mounting debts, and his desperate measures to keep his dangerous life separate from Marion. As Jake left the warehouse, the sun had begun to dip below the city skyline, painting the horizon with streaks of burnt orange and deep crimson. With each passing day, his connection with the world of the living seemed to fade, replaced by his relentless pursuit of the truth. That night, as Jake prepared for another encounter with Marion, he couldn't shake off a sense of unease. He was on the precipice of uncovering the truth, but with it came the fear of confronting the darker aspects of Thomas's life, and the circumstances that led to Marion's untimely end. As the moonlight bathed the morgue in its eerie glow, Jake braced himself for the revelations that awaited him. As Jake laid out the contents of his discoveries from the warehouse before Marion's translucent form, a wave of dread washed over him. The night was unusually cold, and the sterile air of the morgue hung heavy with the promise of unspoken secrets. As he recounted his findings, Marion listened, her form a whispering silhouette against the faint glow of the overhead lamps. The IOUs, the connections to the city's crime bosses, the photograph with Marion's hopeful message. Each revelation was another wound on Marion's already tormented soul. Jake watched as Marion seemed to fold into herself, the flicker in her ghostly form a reflection of her anguish. Yet she bore the revelations with quiet fortitude. This was the painful truth she had sought all along, the final piece to the puzzle of her untimely demise. As the dawn approached, Marion shared a final piece of her own puzzle. She recounted the fateful night of her death, a heated argument with Thomas, his desperate pleas for her to stay away from his affairs, and her own stubborn determination to help the man she loved. Marion's death, Jake realized, was a tragic accident. The underworld had not targeted her. Instead, she was a casualty of a dangerous world Thomas had been desperate to keep her away from. It was a truth as chilling as the cold slab beneath them, a truth they both had to accept. With the arrival of the new day, Jake was left alone in the morgue, surrounded by the cold silence of death and the echoes of Marion's final revelation. He could feel a change in the air. The heavy burden of the past was finally giving way to the light of the truth. As he walked away from the morgue, the city coming alive around him, he felt a sense of closure. Marion's story had been unveiled, her soul would soon be free, and he had fulfilled his duty as the unlikely confidant of the deceased. But the story was not quite finished yet. There was one more task Jake had to complete before he could lay Marion's spirit to rest. A task that would not just bring closure to Marion's tale, but also to his own journey. He had to confront Thomas, the man at the center of this intricate web, the man whose actions had set everything into motion. As dusk draped the city in its purplish hues, Jake found himself standing before Thomas's aging manor. Its grandeur had faded, much like the man it housed, and it bore a sense of melancholy, a ghost of its former glory. Summoning his courage, Jake knocked on the massive door, its deep echoes hinting at the confrontation that lay ahead. A frail, haggard Thomas greeted him, the shadows of his once vibrant personality evident in his weary eyes. Jake began by speaking of Marion, her innocence, and her unwavering love for Thomas. He noticed Thomas's face softening at her mention, a glimmer of regret flickering in his eyes. He then revealed his encounters with Marion's spirit, her pleas for understanding, and her yearning for peace. As he unraveled the facts he had discovered, from the diary to the safe, Thomas's denial gave way to acceptance. He listened, his defenses crumbling, as Jake unveiled the tangled web of deceit and danger that had entangled Marion. In the silence that followed, Thomas hung his head in acceptance of his tragic past, and the devastating consequences his actions had wrought. He confessed to his failures, his desperate attempts to protect Marion from his own demons, and the regret that had haunted him since her death. Thomas's confession was not a plea for absolution, but a catharsis, a release from the guilt that had shackled him for years. He made no attempt to justify his past, only expressed a profound sorrow for the life Marion had been denied. That night, Jake left Thomas's manor with a sense of bittersweet relief. The truth, as ugly as it had been, was finally out, ready to face the light of day. Back in the familiar surroundings of the morgue, Jake awaited Marion's final visit. When she appeared, he relayed Thomas's confession, the regret, and the shared sorrow. Marion's form shimmered with a peaceful glow, her longing for closure finally met. With the first rays of the dawn, Marion's ghostly figure began to fade. She thanked Jake for his courage, his persistence, and his compassion. And then, with a whisper of relief, she vanished, leaving behind the cold, sterile silence of the morgue. Jake walked out of the morgue that morning, leaving behind the echoes of the deceased and their unresolved tales. The city was awakening, oblivious to the extraordinary events of the past weeks. Jake's graveyard shift had ended, his life forever marked by the voices of the departed, their secrets, and their quest for peace. He had not just fulfilled his duty as a night security guard, but had served as a bridge between two worlds, a bearer of truth and a guide to the departed. As he moved on from the morgue, he carried with him the memories, the lessons, and the bittersweet knowledge of his unusual encounters during the graveyard shift. And so, we bid farewell to the night security guard, Jake, and the echoes of the departed that reverberated through his graveyard shift. I hope you enjoyed this chilling tale, and may it serve as a reminder that some stories refuse to be buried, resurfacing in the most unexpected ways. Remember, dear listeners, we are surrounded by stories. Some are visible, while others lurk in the shadows. Thank you for joining us on our scary stories. Until next time, sleep tight, and remember, when the darkness whispers, you never know what it might say. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.